Right, hello everyone. Welcome back to iPet Goat 2. This is the sixth episode and we're decoding it. And yeah, we're making some pretty good progress. So I'm joined here again with Armunn. How are you doing, Armunn?
Hey man, all good, all good. Yeah, we're making slow, very slow progress. We still have plenty to
It's
plenty to go.
we should rename this series to the tortoise and the hare race or something. It's
Yes.
slow and steady wins the race.
Yeah.
Anyway,
No,
let's
but
get into. Mhm.
it's good that we go into tangents as well. I think because if we were to just do what the supposed symbolism of this is, because that is one aspect, then I think it falls short of, you know, doing something more organic, right? Um, Going more into how we perceive this beyond the narrative that is being attempted to be conveyed here. No, I think it's good that we
Oh
go
no,
on tangents.
absolutely, yeah. And there's also multiple threads in this. Of course, we haven't really delved too deeply into the. I mean, what you're seeing here, especially from this scene onwards, well, actually, from the scene with Lily, where she drops the apple onwards, probably up to Baron Samedi and such. I mean, interestingly, you could argue fairly reasonably and strongly that a lot of the symbolism found in that has geopolitical implications to what we're going through right now with the whole US-Iran war. So we're not delving too deeply into that, but what we are delving deeply into is the overarching psycho-spiritual symbolism, which ultimately actually is far more. Um, I would say it's far more significant in terms of what's going on, because when Louis Lefebvre put this together, I think, yes, he probably was. I don't know how the hell he was in the know, but he was decoding or encoding rather in the symbolism a lot of geopolitical events that would eventually come about. But he's showing that those geopolitical events are ultimately an illusion. It's an illusion to
Yeah.
mask an awakening, right? As he would probably call it, or as you'll see here, Christ
Yeah.
consciousness, or of course, just in the general parlance, an alchemical great work, a changing of the seasons, if you will, of history.
Yeah. Although I do not see it as a collective awakening by any means. I mean, this is a chance of as many other periods in time, in whatever cycle you choose, because we can only have access to this one, were opportunities, but these opportunities have to be taken only and can only be taken at an individual level. If if people are expecting anything collective, um, I think you're in for a lot of grief in that regard. What you can do, and in my opinion and recommendation, what you should do is really take the opportunity to know yourself through all this, right? By knowing the fakery and the narratives and the theater on the world stage, the play being performed, you also understand that this reflects a part of you that you had hidden from yourself, because it was actually that play itself that programmed you to forget who you were in the first place, right? So, it is an opportunity, I agree. And it is an opportunity for an awakening, yes, but not at a collective level. I think that at most, as we've spoken in the past, there will be a loss of fuel, which means loss of attention, loss of people, individuals involved um, by belief in all this, as it happens in every cycle. And this is my opinion. I have no evidence to support this, of course, but this is my opinion from my observation. There will be a loss of fuel, but there will not be a complete, awakening like some people have been saying. No, and the Earth is not ascending to the fifth or 33rd dimension, right? I need to put the number 33 here so that people see that we're Masons. And No, that I don't see happening. I think that is, the same as waiting for Christ to return, and it's always right around the corner. It's 2 weeks to flatten the curve. It's 2 weeks for Trump to drain the swamp. It's 2 weeks for Jesus to return. It's always, it is to keep people going after the carrot that never comes. And listen, it's the same on the opposite side. It's 2 weeks and they're going to put us all in FEMA camps. It's 2 weeks and we're all going to die. It's 2 weeks and everything is going to shit. Well, and 2 weeks pass and yeah, things happen, good, bad. It depends. If you're looking at the screen, you're going to be in attention, a state of stress, like that character that will show up later on. That is the TV demon, right? Attached to his head. But in your personal life, there will be, comfortable things, uncomfortable things, changes that have to be done, whatever. You just go through it without being a participant. That is my recommendation in the play.
Oh no, absolutely. There is no. There's not going to be a mass awakening, and this is what you see with the Hanged Man as well. You see evolution. Another thing I actually didn't point out is that the shape of the gallows and the Hanged Man on it actually forms a sort of stylized R. So it's not an evolution; it's a revolution. And of course, as we know, with the autopoietic, self-regulating machine that power likes to produce through blueprints, through cyclical recursiveness, what that, and of course, that's a mimicry of nature, a transgressive mimicry of nature. Effectively, what they provide may seem like a revelation of the method. It may appear to be a conscious evolution, but in fact, active resistance is something they require. Again, it's like the immovable object meeting the unstoppable force.
Yes.
You need the emotional passivity of the quote, quote, normative populations and the active resistance of the dissident populations to thus maintain the stasis that is power, this sort of undead parasite within the host. And this manufactures consensus. Revelation of the method manufactures consensus, because ultimately people becomes, as we're beginning to see, so cognitively exhausted by what appears to be the labyrinthian destruction of everything, or the labyrinthian puzzlement of power, and the destruction of everything, that everything is collapsing round about them. Ultimately, they reach a certain threshold where they simply just fling their arms up in the air and they say, right, I give up. Just do whatever you must, digital IDs, anything. Just let me off this roller coaster ride. And this is the plan, really. This is the plan. And of course, you have the cyclic, or rather engineered destruction of the old to bring in the new. So all of this it's designed. The Epstein scandal, that they permitted that to come out. They permitted all of this cultural, political destruction, the trust in society, the destruction of the trust within authority. All of this, that was all engineered, all planned, because ultimately these nations, these empires, they're all artificial. They're created from probably a central control room. They're scripted, and every one of them have a formulaic plan of their rise and of their fall. And by the way, that formula is very, very. It's in my first book. I couldn't believe it when you go through all of these civilizations, and you're like, wow, they all rise and fall in the sort of same stages, same patterns, the same strange psychological tendencies take hold, the same neuroses take hold in the society. You're thinking, wow. I remember at the time when I was writing that, I did put it down. I said, this must be a natural cycle. But then I started looking more and more and more into it, and I'm saying, no, there's no way this can be a natural cycle. This has to be a model. It's a model that you're seeing playing out. And the reason for that, ultimately, is, for example, at the end of these civilizations or empires, you see this engineered revelation of the method. They literally reveal everything, hence apocalypse from the Greek, meaning revelation, right? To pierce the
Yeah.
veil. All of it,
Yeah. Well,
that part alone shows that it's engineered to some degree.
yeah. Well, I think that you are correct. Yes. Passivity is partly the objective, but the main objective there is not passivity. It is to reinforce the central point, which is why I also disagree with the term, not with what you tried to say, but with the term revelation of the method, because that would imply that these things are actually happening beyond the world stage. That people are actually getting killed in the psyops, and that the politicians are really making these moves, and so on and so forth, and so they reveal what they are about to do, what is planned. No, they reveal what it's like when you have a series and you want to keep people hooked. You show and a preview from the next episode, right? And so the preview from the next episode will keep you hooked to watch the next episode, because it gives you just enough interest, right, to maintain yourself hooked onto that series, right? And you want to watch, oh, is this really going to happen? Are they going to kill this character, or are they going to do this or do that? And how did he get into that trouble I saw in that little snippet, right? So I think that the reinforcement of the central issue is the legitimization of the power. That is a power that is entirely given by each individual. And this is why I reinforce and insist and reiterate the individual path in all of this, because we are analyzing something that is collective, for sure, that is presented to the collective, but it has all to do with the individual. It's your choice, your volition, together with your ego. And there are certain things that people may ask, but how do I get in touch with my ego? How do I, through that ego, get in touch with my essence? How do I know my own individuality? Well, and the first step to that is stop talking to yourself and start listening, right? Because we tell ourselves things. Oh, next week is, I don't know, Trump really going to do this? Or, is war really going to go here or go there? Or am I this? Am I that? Am I in a globe? Am I in a flat? This kind of thing. We tell ourselves things, so we talk to ourselves. So stop talking and listen. And when you start listening through all of this, you start hearing a voice that doesn't speak words. Remember my motto, truth speaks no words, and that guides you to knowing yourself. You understand? Outside of all of this, but this is a reflection of your own universe. This play is so enticing to many because it is, imbued in our psyches deep down, even before the programming. And that's why this story works so well. But the power that is legitimized by the resistance, by those that are pro and those that are anti, by those that are for and those that are against, the central point is legitimized. There is a power there, right? But that power only exists if you help it or if you fight it. You understand? So, it's like when people sometimes say that the opposite of love is hate. No, the opposite of love is indifference, right? Because if you hate someone, in fact, you are loving them in a way. And if you love someone, you can also hate them for loving them, because there's an involvement, right? But if you are indifferent to someone, then you know that there's neither love or hate there, right? And that removes the power from that person in your life. So, well, I
you're
just
no longer compulsively engaged in them, and that's an
correct.
interesting point, because the one who hates you, let's just say your enemy, the one who loves you, let's say your friend or what have you, ultimately they will what's the word, maybe they will inspect your personality. They will look for the flaws in you. They will look for the, whatever it may be. They will look at you as a, as a human being in all facets, and they will investigate you, right? And
Mhm.
um almost overanalyze you. And interestingly, the only difference between love and hate in that regard is when it comes down to love, is they accept the flaws, and hate is, of course, they completely are repulsed by the flaws. But ultimately, like what you're saying, you're still providing emotional engagement
Yes.
with the thing. You're still there's a compulsion of engagement in that entire process.
Yes, it's false love, because true love is, it's a connection that happens between two individuals that are themselves. And then the acceptance, of course, is absolutely there. It's not a matter of, oh, you chose to do this or do that. Now I can't love you anymore, or that kind of thing. Or, um, you go from hate to love because now that person changed towards the model that you preferred. And therefore now they can be considered a friend or a lover or whatever it is, right? So that is false love, because it is, it implies a conditional validation of certain models of behavior from the mind character. Um, and this is not the case with actual love. It is not, and it is not dependent on any of that. And when you are truly connected to someone, you are connected. Period. It's not something that you debate or weigh the pros and cons, and should I, or should I not? No, you just are, you know. And if that connection is true, you will know, and things will reflect back at you in the same way, right? You always get a feedback from life itself, right? But anyway, we're going on another tangent, but yeah, you are entirely correct. That is that dichotomy of love and hate is basically false love, right?
I think though this is actually quite interesting. Just to say one last thing, this
Hmm.
ties in with the knowledge of the fruit of the knowledge of the tree of good and of evil, good and evil. So in essence, the good and evil doesn't really matter. What you're seeing there is the same thing that we're attempting to broach, which is that the good and evil are placeholder terms for effectively the positive and the negative charges.
Hmm.
Ultimately, they are both charges. They maintain the sort of cyclic nature, right, of
Yes,
an engine, for example,
and
right?
both needed, both very necessary. Go on. Yeah.
Exactly, both are needed. So this is what, funnily enough, what you see in one of the potential etymological breakdowns of that of the Satyr square, right? Satyr, arepo, tenet, opera, rotas. Now, arepo is a very difficult one to find an etymology for. I've linked it both to Sanskrit and to Hebrew, and there's two distinct ones. But the Sanskrit one, the one which I can recall, a repo may relate to a repo or a repas, which means uh, to be, basically to be a nihilist, to be without good or to be indifferent, right? To be without good or evil, to be without duality. And so therefore you find, just briefly breaking it down, quote, he who is without the knowledge of good or evil, the sower, works the wheels with skill, or works the whirlwind, or works the cycle with skill or
Hmm.
manipulation. So ultimately what you're seeing is um, fundamentally what we've been commenting on with the numbers is that people are they don't. I don't think a lot of people know thyself. I don't mean know thyself as in, a sort of wishy-washy thing, but I mean know thyself as in what fundamentally are you? What are the epistemic limitations? What are the limitations of your mind in terms of what you can know? What are the limit? What is knowledge itself? And this is another thing I think was being pointed out in that Garden of Eden parable, which is that the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, that knowledge itself is almost hubristic. Knowledge is not like information or data,
Mhm.
or even a wise parable or what have you. Knowledge is this notion that you have a crystallized view of that thing, that you, as a human being, almost have a godlike omniscience over the concept, right? So, for example, when we say death, the reason we convey death through the word, which is the conceptual vehicle, is because it actually, in a way, permits us power over death. We have a vantage point over death. When we think of death, we think of death in representational terms. We don't think of death, of course, in the boundless unknown that it is,
Mhm.
because we can't necessarily comprehend it. So this is what you find with, I believe, most of human philosophy. Well, really, all of human philosophy is, and most of human civilization, ideologies, anything like that, is that people take what may be mere models of explication to explain this specific concept to you, the human being, and then they just extrapolate that out to being some sort of objective reality. And it's a very dangerous thing. And ultimately, I think that is what's sort of parable surrounding the Garden of Eden,
Mhm.
specifically the knowledge of good and evil. I think that's what it's stating. It's almost
Yes,
a portent for things to come.
but that knowledge of good and evil is not actual knowledge. It is merely a distinct representation of aspects that were a whole and now became separated, right? So you treat these aspects as good and these aspects as evil, and therefore you create a binary. And again, I say, whenever you create a binary, you give an external center power, which I would say it's a shadow reflection. So you project a shadow, a rejection of something, and that rejection of something is going to be projected back at you, right? So that the idea of knowledge of good and evil, which I understand how knowledge is used there. I know it's not in the way that you were conveying knowledge before, but I would say it's more to distinguish good from evil, right? But the issue there is that yes, there is evil exists and good exists, but they are both parts of who we are, right? And there's a healthy place for all these circumstances. There is a healthy place for violence. There is a healthy place for, even outright killing someone, right? There is a healthy place. There are moments where the context is appropriate for that to happen, as well as there is a healthy place, of course, for nurturing and, all the other things. So it's the separation. It's by treating parts of you as external, right? So, these evil parts of me come from demons or Satan or whatever, the snake in Eden, right? Whatever, or the archons or the demiurge. It doesn't matter, right? These evil parts come from there, right? When anything happens in my life that is uncomfortable, it's an archon, or it's a demon, or it's Satan trying to mess up my life, right? So this separation, of course, reinforces the central point because you're removing yourself not only from your responsibility of, because if you know all your good and evil, talking in those terms, you then know where, or begin to know where they belong in a healthy state, right? And you start discerning, not distinguishing, but discerning what is the appropriate time for all of your aspects, all of you, who you are, right? And all of us have it. All of us, you can practice to be a monk or whatever, you will also carry it with you. You know, it's in your luggage. You can't just stop being who you are. You can pretend all you like, but it will take a toll, right? And that toll usually becomes heavier as the buildup progresses, in my opinion.
Exactly. Right, man. We'll crack on with this. And I do stress to the
And
viewers that this
and
is
there
all
went
a preamble.
and there went half an hour with
There,
just
exactly, yes. But this, yeah, there is value to this preamble. I can assure you. Right.
yeah, hopefully. So you see, just pause a second there, if you can. So you saw that Christ figure with an eye between, so in the forehead, which would be represented as the third eye, with the eyes closed and sort of shivering, as if it's dreaming, right? As if it's absorbing some sort of dream-like information. And then, of course, it moves to this character that is having a complete nightmare. And of course, you see markets plunge written in his eyes. So that's what he's seeing. He's in panic about the economy and the state of the geopolitical, perhaps, or the wars or the whatever. And this is why I think intuitively that Christ figure is a preamble for AI, because it is absorbing all of the stories in the screen, so in the world stage, right? And the hint that that Christ figure is absorbing is that they immediately go to this character, right, who is experiencing the terror of looking at the world through media, right? So when the quote unquote AI God, which again is not divine by any means, or not even close, of course, it will have human agency there. But when it is presented, it will have a database of all that is considered true, when it's only true within the framework of the world stage, within the framework of the narrative, right? And these things build upon themselves. So if this thing is assumed as true, then that other thing can build upon it. You understand? So if you remove the first premise, everything crumbles from there on. But all the answers and all the decisions that supposedly will be conveyed by this dreaming Jesus, that to me represents AI, looking at it from the perspective of now, and again, with my intuition, will be within the acceptable narrative, as treating it as absolutely true, in my opinion.
The first thing I want to mention is what you find throughout these various scenes is that. So, for example, this scene here, you have the blue eyes of this boy. I believe he's called Ludovic, which interestingly is a variant, a very ancient Germanic variant of Louis. So, of course, the Louis Lefebvre, the author of this work. But the blue eyes you see on the goat, you also see it, I believe, with Lily. You see it with this character, and I believe there's another character you see it with as well. What's notable about the blue eyes, and again, this is what I sort of found, is that the blue eyes are typically consistent with characters that are they're under, if you will, mind control in a sense, right? They are totally within the the sort of serpentine demiurgic reality, right, if you will. And it's interesting because you can sort of find hints between mind control and blue in our own reality with, for example, Bluebird, right? Project Bluebird. What's notable too is this. I did mention something about the AI, pardon me, the third eye. But even the AI, I mean, the term itself, the acronym AI, and this is, I mean, it's of course very notable when you look at the all-seeing eye on the pyramid, right? So you have the pyramid, which is the A, you have the I, which is the I, and then you can tie that in with the Ayin, which we have as well. So it's like what you stated. It's all of these characters are almost, I think, they're showing, if you will, autobiographically, that Louis Lefebvre and his sort of this alter ego, right? I don't necessarily see Christ as AI, but I see it as as almost like his alter ego. This is the face that he um the superficial face that he sort of presents to this society, and that when it comes to this time, I think it's uranium, market plunge, and war coverage. So when it comes to these this state of permacrisis, which arguably was still even ongoing in 2012, it just wasn't as volatile, or the crises weren't as frequent then. But what I think you're finding is that it's almost um, he is necessarily shedding his skin a bit like the serpent. He's taken
Mm.
on a more, I don't want to say Christ consciousness, but I mean there's no really other way to get around it. I do actually think he's encoded that Christ consciousness idea into iPet Goat too. Um, that's my take upon it. I
Yeah,
think it's this distinction between the superficial and
mm.
what is actually authentic and real, and it's this battle between the two.
Yeah, it is an interpretation and it's valid. And it might even be, one of the layers of interpretation. So it may have multiple layers, not just one, of interpreting it. Of course, we'll never really know for sure, not even who this guy is. But I think that taking into account all that the animation conveys, I think that Lefebvre wasn't presenting a personal journey, but he was presenting a collective narrative, and the direction that a collective narrative would take. Now, we can argue whether he was doing that because he was in the know and was given the task of putting this forward, which is what I think. Um, I lean towards that, or that he was able to read the narrative and predict. I don't go there. I don't think that that's likely. I think that it is a work that does a sort of um, symbolic presentation, not only of what has already happened, of what is happening, and we're talking about 2012 at the time, but what will happen in the narrative. And so I believe that this is a part of a scenes of the next episode that was made in this format, and that's why this video went viral. Although I only watched it when you invited me to this, but I know that it was a viral video. Everyone and their mother was talking about it for quite some time back then. I remember that. So, but yes, it is an interpretation, the individual journey, and so on and so forth. It might be encoded there as a layer two, but I tend to see this more as a presentation of the collective narrative that was intended, not a personal journey, which of course you can also pick up something that was meant to be a collective presentation and see your reflection there and
Yeah.
turn it around for transmute it, do an alchemy and transmute it for your own good. So of course that can happen, right? But if we're talking about intention of the author, I think it was collective presentation.
I tend to I think it is collective presentation, but for example, let's take Tolkien. Tolkien's
Hmm.
work it's very, very personal. Every character in that book, arguably every author, every character in the book is a sort of fractal or a fragment of their psyche. And I think it's a similar thing that's going on here.
Sure.
Louis
Hmm.
Lefebvre, and again, I'm not saying he's doing this egotistically or egomaniacally or narcissistically, but this is what happens when you create work. You almost take your microcosm that you are going through, and then you extrapolate it out to the macrocosm. This is, of course, what human beings tend to do anyway, right?
Uh-huh.
We were going on,
Mhm.
going into transcendental idealism, the idea between the phenomenon and the noumenon, or the subjective and the objective, and people tend to conflate the two, and again, because of that, they tend to become hubristic after a while. But there's another thing to mention with the eyes is that, and I put here that the eyes are the window to the soul, and
Mhm.
what you're seeing is that with these blue eyes, these icy blue eyes, with the goat was of course entranced. We saw the spiral. With Lily, she closed her eyes. She went to sleep, if you will. And then with this character, you're seeing that his very soul is being tinged with sort of destruction and this sort of heavily medicated anesthetization.
Mhm.
But also, as well, this appears to be a boy, an adolescent, a young boy. It's a child. Perhaps it's indicative of the idea that the new generation, be it Gen Z, Gen Alpha, what have you, um, firstly, they're being heavily medicated. You saw at the side of them, there's this pile of pills and syringes. He's also being pacified by the screens. Of course, you saw the screen of the whereupon is the demiurgos. And then, of course, they're locked into a psychological matrix of the permacrisis, um, which itself is an illusion, right? It's an illusion. The window to the soul, which is the eye, hasn't become a window; it's become a mirror. And this is what I think you find with society in general, which is that, of course, we live in a society now that is focused on the froth rather than the taste of the beer.
Mhm.
I mean, a prime example is what you're seeing, this sort of new pattern throughout celebrities of this, what's, loosely could be called a new beauty standard, where they're going in, mass and radical um, plastic surgery and all of this. And all of this is being driven, funnily enough, by social media and primarily filters, be it on Snapchat, TikTok, or what have you. And eventually, what happens is, this is actually dictated. This is stated or stipulated within what's known as the cultivation theory. Is that the more you actually become accustomed, almost as a cultural milieu, um, to, let's just say, this filter, right? This beauty filter.
Mhm.
Eventually, as women, individual women or men, look at this filter, they begin to become almost they believe they shed off the uncanny valley effect, the effect of there's something not quite right with that, the way it's making me look, and then eventually they almost become enamored with it.
Yeah.
They do the same thing, by the way, with music nowadays.
Mhm.
Music nowadays is objectively bad. It's crap. The pop music it's objectively crap. I mean, just from the lyrical content alone, the dynamic ranges in the music and the tonality, the melody, it's subjectively crap. Um, and but the way that they get by that, right, it being objectively crap, is that they just consistently play it either on the radio, or they'll just inseminate it into or insert it rather into what do they call it, Spotify playlists and
Hmm.
such. And what happens is the more you become accustomed to that, the more that is within your vicinity, within your environment, the more space in the environment it takes up by osmosis, by this
Yeah.
cultivation theory. You almost just think of it as good. And the problem is, this has a knock-on effect of actually shaping your very perception of reality, because again, it gets back to the notions of transcendental idealism, this distinction between the phenomenon and the noumenon, or the
Yeah.
subjective and the objective. The subject of the mind eventually, because it can be manipulated, this is why they use propaganda and informational warfare, it actually projects, it doesn't just perceive, it projects reality itself through the alteration of one's mind, through one's cognitive apparatus. So I think
Yes.
something like
Yeah.
that's going on here as well.
Yes, because the perception is already, let's say, programmed to see only that, and therefore anything that is different is not even paid attention to, or anything that would contradict that vision that this is good, this music is good, or this whatever is good, um, would not even be there, right? And yes, you point out well that he's heavily medicated. We see the pills and the needles there, right? So,
Oh yeah. I mean, you're seeing that quite a lot as well, even in the quote unquote beauty spaces, with Ozempic,
mhm.
and you've literally got a hyper medicalized society. What's interesting as well, I don't know if you can you see my cursor there?
Yes.
Um, see there, see that. That is
Hmm.
actually the symbol of, or the sign of, Capricorn as well. So again, we're getting a link between this Demiurgos character and perhaps Saturn, or the Saturnine archetype, this Lord of Time, this great devourer, perhaps even this paranoid devourer as well. He devours his own children, as we're seeing here, as civilizations themselves do, in both war or any really economic sacrificial act, be it wage slavery or what have you. They
Mm.
do that because, again, it's like what you see with the Saturnine archetype. He understood that even time would devour time, so he realized that because of his, I guess, Godelian incompleteness, that he is this sort of inconsistency of his own being, that eventually he would destroy himself. Um, because
Sure.
if you are the great devourer, then, I mean, once you've devoured everything else, you will ultimately devour yourself. So this is what you see with the Dark Enlightenment and the AI itself. And this, they're looking for an escape hatch, an escape, even an escape valve. They're trying to get out of this ontological Chinese finger trap, if you will.
Yes, but the archetype of Saturn can only consume, and haunt, if you like, using that word loosely, that which is compatible with it. So if it is aligned with truth, Saturn can't touch it, right? It's only the things that are um, that believe in it, that place a kind of loose worship onto its own system, can be touched by Saturn and can therefore be regulated and directed or destroyed eventually by Saturn. So it is at the end, when you say that, for example, time would realize that even itself would eat itself, right? Like time would eat time. Uh, More than that, I would say that it becomes aware that it is not a living archetype in that sense. That it is a representation of a sort of test, if you like, a sort of measure if you like, for what is organic and what is not, right? And if it's not organic, it has free reign to, torment like it torments this character we're seeing on the screen here. So I think that it is not. Understand that all the archetypes that we are psychologically uh, influenced by were put there. You understand? They were put there. They were concepts that that eventually seeped in to our memory rooms, and that doesn't mean that there isn't an organic force that we that we came to represent as Saturn, the archetype. But again, we go back to that discussion of numbers, right? It's not that I can't have 3 apples, is that if I hold 3 apples, I don't have the number 3. I perceive 3 as a concept because I project onto it a tool that was, first of all, a measurement tool of, okay, 1, 2, 3. And so the same thing would apply to the archetypes. You understand? I don't know if you're following me there, which is that there was an organic force, let's say, that as a facilitator, we came up with the concept to explain it, right? To convey it. But that concept substituted the actual force.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm trying to say?
No, absolutely. It's the same with even numbers. Numbers have come to dictate our lives rather than just be a tool. And this is what you see if the juxtaposition between the Promethean fire and perhaps the primal fire. And you could say the same thing about archetypes themselves. The archetypes have become the personas. And so what the personas are, or of course the Promethean fire, is that because they're pardon me, because the artificial sort of variants of them, because they're born of friction, right? So, for example, the archetypes that you're speaking of, really within our Western society, they have been pushed vis-a-vis celebrities and cultural icons, right? All of them embody some form of archetype. Some of them embody 2 or 3 forms of archetypes, and they're almost cliches of these archetypes. So, for example, a lot of the hippie movement and that flower power stuff. I mean, even the term hippie, you can trace that back, I believe, etymologically to ancient Greek, and the hippias, which were the nobles, right? And they would all have long hair. And again, you can trace that even further back to the ideas of that of Jesus and the Messiah. So ultimately, they were playing upon archetypes, they were playing upon aesthetics, they were playing upon vibes. That's you actually see that hyper pronounced within our own world today, right? With social media, algorithmic reach, and things like that. The videos and the sort of internet stars that make it, firstly, if they're not simply just established by the system themselves, they themselves are fundamentally crafting a persona that plays upon certain biocompatible archetypes, which, of course, human beings find perhaps heroic, or they find them to be in some sort of way, a sort of perfect, a sickly sweet, perfect vision of that thing. And funnily enough, this is what you're starting to see within our own um, AI-driven world, which is that, for example, let's take the beauty standards again. All of the women are beginning to look the same. All of the celebrities are beginning to look the same. Not all women. I mean, the women that go, for mass amounts of
I got
plastic surgery. Just want to make that point clear. Or the men as well, right? With steroids, they all are beginning to look the same. So these standards have actually become a model of standardization. They're not necessarily, well, this is a general what is generally perceived as beautiful, right? These are now beauty standards. And so what you're starting to see is people are beginning to almost reflect, because of social media, because of the cultivation theory, they're actually beginning to reflect and to become mirrors for the system itself, rather than being unique
Yes.
individuals, uniquely gifted with their own unique signature of consciousness, of thought. All of that is beginning to be substituted and supplanted for merely a standardization model as proposed or subtly introduced vis-a-vis social media, vis-a-vis all of this. You know, the sort of
Yes.
drip feed of
A
the
hundred,
algorithm.
100% agreed on that point. That absolutely and this is what I was trying to convey, and that you summarized much better than me, was that yes, the concept of the archetype that we, for example, we now just said Saturn. Saturn is a concept. It's not the actual organic force behind it, right? I'm not denying that there is an organic force, but the concept itself, whether it's Saturn or Mars or Venus or whatever, became um, more prevalent and taken as true than the thing that we interpreted in the first place to call Saturn or to call Venus, right? So, for example, the force of beauty, we could, okay, let's call this Venus. We make an agreement and let's call this Venus, and we attribute to it certain characteristics and so on and so forth. But the problem is that we delve so much into the concept of Venus that we forgot the organic Venus, right? We no longer have contact with the organic Venus, right? As another example. So absolutely 100% agreed with what you said. Then people become, of course, empty shells following models that lead absolutely nowhere, and they live an unlife through their mind characters, just trying to be accepted.
Oh, certainly, yeah. I mean, there's just to look at this very interesting um, piece of symbolism you see here. So we saw previously, if I can get it back here, yeah. So what you're actually finding the sort of how Louis Lefebvre would describe, of course, through symbolic terms, the system itself, right? Um, so of course we have so you'll notice the demiurge. It's always to do with the eye. He's ever watchful. He's also reptilian in his complexion and his skin. And what that is indicating is firstly the word Draco comes from a drechme. It's a verb in Greek, I believe primarily ancient Greek, which means to watch or to like to watch as in let's say a prisoner being watched by a guard. That type of sort of surveillance
Hmm.
would be our modern terminology for it. So you have the sort of surveilling reptile. Again, he's very cold. He's of the R complex. He's of the basal ganglia. He doesn't have the biological capacity for love, for empathy, for even any of these human emotions. Right? It's almost similar to what we would term as uh, psychopaths. Right? Psychopathy, which rules the world, which rules the upper echelons of power. You'll notice as well that what we're fundamentally seeing of this creature is not a real image. Well, pardon me, it's not a real manifestable being, but it's a representational image. So all of it, all of this, all of the power of the system is ultimately illusory. It's
Absolutely.
based on representational imaging, which of
Absolutely.
course affects our very psychology. Sorry, man.
Sorry, just to cut in just real quick. And how many people, just taking into account what you just said, how many people will say, no, it's actual reptilians, right? Because of David Icke and, all those that promoted that idea. Because then it becomes an actual reality. You understand? The concept comes to stand in for the symbol, and the objective, or what the symbol tried to convey in the first place, is lost. That's why I've always been, well, not always, but in recent years, been a fierce uh,
Opponent.
opponent. Yes, I'm sorry, my word, I had the brain freeze there. Opponent of the idea of literalization, right? Which happens in religion, which happens in a lot of these things, right? Which is to take the symbolic as literal. And that is a fine example that you just presented. So, we see the reptilian eye in the dollar bill and in this imagery here. So, therefore, it's actual reptilians. And how do they go about among us? Oh, because they're shapeshifters. Okay, but because how do you know they're shapeshifters? Oh, because I saw images on TV that showed their eyes changing, right? So you take reality from what you see on the screen, right? You understand this? This goes
No, no,
into
well, this also goes into
into
what we were saying.
insanity. Yeah, yeah,
Well, it also goes into what we were saying regarding the representational image becoming the thing. Another
yeah.
example, by the way, is oh God, I forget the chapter and verse now. It's God, it's somewhere in the New Testament, but some individual mentioned, and of course this is a generally attested to Christian mainstream Christian
Mm,
idea. Historically, this has not been the case. The Trinitarian doctrine was imposed upon Christianity over years and years, hundreds of years, well, at this point, thousands of years. Um, of course, you had many what were called heresies, like Arianism and such, that didn't attest to the Trinitarian doctrine. There was some Christian sects that didn't necessarily attest to the divinity of Jesus. Um, but again, I'm going to bring up this point, not necessarily to ruffle feathers, though I probably will in the process, but to show that people can really, this is the issue with the slavery, the enslavement of mankind, is because people can, firstly, they don't understand themselves. They don't understand how they think. They don't understand the limitations of their own uh, sort of epistemological and ontological framework that they're working with their consciousness. And so what happens is they conflate the image with the real, and then eventually you have a death of the real. So one example of this is where it states, I'm paraphrasing here, but it states, quote, um, the sun is the image of the invisible God, right?
mm.
He is the image of the invisible God. By the way, I've got literally reams of pages on debunking the Trinitarian doctrine and debunking the divinity of Christ, even from this is from the canonical Gospels themselves, right? I don't do that in some sort of blasphemous way, but I do it to point out this issue, which is that people have taken the image, which the sun is the image of the invisible God, and they've said, he's the invisible God, right? So
Right.
it's the same
In the
thing
same
you
way that
see
they've said,
nowadays.
in the same way that they've said, oh, this character Jesus that they never met, although some of them will swear that they have, he appeared in a dream or a vision or whatever, um, is the actual thing, was a literal historical person that did all these things that were written about supposedly 2000 years ago, with all the aspects, both fantastical and n- so obviously symbolic instead of literal, that are written in, right? And not even to mention, if we are to consider that the text is 2000 years old, how many edits it had, right? Not even talking about that. So it's the same thing. Yes, oh, the Son is the image of God, right? Oh, Jesus is the Son of God, therefore, right? He is the human representation of God. It was originally, and you know my opinion, I think that the gospel fable was originally written as a fiction, knowingly as a fiction. It was never supposed to be taken literally, in my opinion. This is my opinion. That was to convey symbolically uh, uh, parts and aspects of the individual psyche to pay attention to, right? Because you can't explain any other way. You have to explain through parable, through metaphor, through symbol. These things you can't really easily come up with words that define these things, right? So you have to act to convey them symbolically. That's what basically all fiction does. Some direct towards a more organic truth, some direct towards a narrative story, a world stage story, but nonetheless they do it through symbol, right, to be interpreted. And the problem, everything loses its symbolic value when it's interpreted literally. Everything. You can no longer read any symbol, any message that was trying to be conveyed if you interpret it literally, right? So absolutely agreed with you there, man. Sorry to cut you off there, but
No,
um,
you're. I mean, it's absolutely spot on. I mean, even this is Jesus stated in several gospels. For example, this is the Gospel of Matthew. There's several other ones, by the way, but again, I'm not bringing this up to attack Christian theology. This actually will tie in with the Phanos Protogenos, the firstborn that you see within the egg there. But he states this. This is Matthew chapter 13, verse 13. This is why I speak to the crowds in parables. Although they see, they don't really see. And although they hear, they don't really hear or understand. Um, which is exactly what we're just stating here.
yeah.
People take everything literally. They take it all literally because ultimately you're I don't know. It's I think 80% of the human species, they are just they're sort of stuck on this black and white thinking, quite
because
literally.
they're stuck at mind character level.
Yeah.
They're cut off from the ego, and the ego is that, let's say, creative, although creative might be misinterpreted here, but that creative force of the psyche that is linked to who we are essentially. And so yes, to them you have to explain. Do you know those people, I don't know if you've ever worked with them, that they can't do anything without having very specific and particular instructions on each
Oh
step of the
God,
way.
yeah. Oh
Like
my God.
okay, so you
Yeah.
hammer the nail in. Okay, you hold the nail and you hold the hammer with the blunt part of the hammer facing the nail, and then you hit and try to miss your finger. That kind of, you understand?
That reminds me of a Faulty Towers episode, or a Monty Python
Yeah.
skit or something.
Yeah. So and that is prevalent among people who live at mind character level, because again, that's why I think that when the concept of AI is presented, it is presented as a copy of a mind character. You understand? And AI and mind character are very similar in the sense that, in the same way that an AI, a mind character can only quote unquote think within the database that is given, right? It can't think outside of the database. That is only the ego, right? And so when one is presented, there is an immediate connection and relatability from one's mind character towards an AI, right? And you can even see it. Oh, it's much smarter than me. No, it isn't. It's just quicker, and it has access to far more memory banks and far more database
But you're
than your mind character has. Sorry.
sorry to interject. You're
Yeah, yeah.
almost and just in that point alone, you're speaking to the problem with modern the modern economy, modern anything really, which is that, and I noticed this when I was in university, which is they're absolutely like erotically fixated. All the academics are erotically fixated on efficiency. Like they start. I'm not joking you when I say erotic. I'm using that not literally, but of course in a very strong figurative sense. These people salivate over the idea surrounding efficiency.
Sorry, I just got an image of them rubbing their nipples. Oh, it's so efficient.
Well,
Sorry.
yes, that's almost exactly what it's like. And I'm looking at it, I'm thinking they're talking about digital twinning, the Internet of all things. Yeah, they're all the academics are like, look how great this is, while of course circularly rubbing their nipples, fixated on this grand Molochian idea, right? And I'm thinking this will literally destroy everything. You're going to destroy any human quality in society eventually. If of course, if this is allowed to continue unabated, which it probably won't. You're already seeing the murmurings of discontent among people. A vocal minority despise this, including myself, of course. Really, what will come out of this? Efficiency will not win the day. What's going to win the day is fundamentally human the word be human resilience or human determination, the determination of the human soul.
At an
And
individual level, yes.
at an individual level. But this is the efficiency thing where they see, for them, they don't care if the thing is beautiful. They only care that its form is related purely to its function. And this is the same with intelligence. Intelligence is based upon now informational processing. And what's interesting is the more the education has magnified informational processing as the primary teller of intelligence, people have actually got less and less intelligent, not just, of course, in terms of their critical thinking capabilities and the ability to conjure novel and interesting thoughts, but also in terms of informational processing. Because what happens? Well, the human being, right? We are machines of novel generation. We're not machines of mere informational processing. So what do you do?
Replication, yes.
Of replication, exactly. So what do you do if you've got this sort of threshold of the human potential in terms of informational processing? Well, we need to get rid of human beings, basically, or we have to demote them in terms of intelligence or their intellectual primacy in the society. And what we'll do is we'll depose them and we'll supplant that with machines, and then eventually the machines will come to dictate the very soul of the society, which at that point will be huskified.
You know what I find really funny is whether I hear someone say, I long and wish for the day when I can plug in to a machine and live in a virtual reality of sorts and that kind of thing. Or if they say, I dread the day when they force me to hook up to a machine and live in a virtual reality. I find it very funny because those people don't realize that on one side or the other, they are already in the machine. They are already acting in accordance to the programming of the machine, whether they love it or hate it, whether they wish for it or fear it, they are already in the virtual reality. So it doesn't even need to come physically, because I don't even think that it's possible in the way that is at least depicted in movies and so on, like you hook up a cable onto your spine and go to another world. I don't think that's at all possible. Of course, you can put goggles and you're playing with perception. You're not actually, touching the deeper psychological perception of things. But it doesn't even need to come, because they are already living in the virtual reality. You understand? The virtual reality where this is real.
And what is the virtual reality but effectively a reality based upon representational and narrow concepts?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You're not seeing the totality of the tree. You're only seeing one side of the tree. For example, here's. By the way, this you can actually attach this and associate this with everything throughout society. I was watching a Joe Rogan podcast recently, and it was that guy from. He was the guest? It was that guy from Small Soldiers. I forget the guy's name. You know, the bald guy with the glasses, and I think he's an American comedian. Anyway, whatever his name is, and they were talking about the first thing they brought up when talking about, virtual reality and AI is like, yeah, it's really scary, man, really scary. And then they're just like, but I hope I live long enough so I can experience like AI or virtual porn. And so I'm like thinking, there you go. Because I not meaning to be morbid or sick here, pornography itself is the representational image of sex. It's not sex itself. Sex is a bonding ritual. It's a ritual of reproduction, if you will. It's a ritual to grow you closer to your partner, right? Because we need, a crazy idea here. We actually need emotional connection as a human being. Crazy concept, I know, but this is it. It's ultimately what you do is it's like the wheat from the chaff idea is, and of course, interestingly, that took place on the threshing floor, which usually was right in front of the temple complexes, at least in this the Mesopotamian Semitic worlds, and it would take place on the mountain because that's the closest to the
but
god.
That's even more interesting because what sold and propagated the internet was porn. So it wouldn't surprise me that it was porn also used to propagate whatever supposed, and I say supposed, virtual reality they would sell.
But this is what you see. It's like trimming the fat off something. You make it lean. Sure, it looks great. Like it's basically a filet mignon of conception. But there's a taste to the ribeye.
I love your French there. Filet mignon. Yes,
I know. I do. I have been working on it. But there's a taste to the ribeye and the chuck eye that, of course, it doesn't look as great, but there's a taste there that the filet mignon, there's my Scottish French again, cannot replicate. It can't reach. In fact, you could say the filet mignon is not. It really, there's very little taste to it because there's no fat. It's the same with the wheat and chaff, right? You separate the wheat and the chaff. Again, the knowledge of good and evil. You're separating things out. And again, if you separate the thing out, and ultimately what it was based upon, the mutually interdependent contrast with its twin, that it was basing the entire holistic, what would you say, essence of the thing.
It's like when we buy bread here in this village. We realized what passed for bread where we were. So absolutely, it's.
Oh no, absolutely. It's funny you mentioned that because I just went to a farmer's market recently, and I got unhomogenized milk, with the cream on top. And now, don't get me wrong, I've got that. I've had that in the supermarket before, but holy moly, see, tasting this thing, and then the double cream, and we also got einkorn bread and rye bread. And I'm tasting it. I'm saying, Jesus, this is great. And you don't feel bad afterwards. It's like almost a medicine in and of itself. But I mean, that's exactly that. It's exactly that. It's a representation of bread. It's the image of bread, but it's not quite bread, It's Wonder Bread. So
anyway, man, let's continue.
Right.
So,
So this image
mm,
here, you're seeing the birth of Phanes. So from this Orphic egg hatched Phanes, meaning to bring light or to shine, the or the Phanos Protogenos, which is the firstborn. This is what Jesus was called, by the way, the firstborn of all creation, or words to that effect. So it's the primordial golden winged deity of light and generation. Uh, so the hatching we see here is the micro level realization of the macrocosmic event, and this is the creation of mankind, right? And in the Kabbalistic idea, it's the contraction of the divine light of the Ein, hence Simsum, right? The contraction, and then that allowed space for something else to take its place, and this is what you see of the self-regulating machine of power, which is that they have to artificially destroy periodically, so that of course they can sort of firstly create the pressure necessary for this Phanos Protogenos to then be birthed. It's a bit like the coal, for example, it's the quartz. You in lighters, you have quartz, a quartz crystal. You
mhm.
pressurize that quartz crystal to generate the spark. Similarly, of course, you pressurize coal and you turn it into the diamond, and so on and so forth. Right. So it's these ideas. You'll notice that the snake wraps its tail round 4 times. Why is that? Well, firstly, it's the square. It's the it's a representation of the three-dimensional world in which we inhabit. It's also a representation of the representational reality in which we inhabit, the virtual reality, that of the power, the demiurgos, the reptilian or serpentine essence at the top of power. And you'll notice as well is that you just see the shadow of the Phanes Protogenos. That's because the Phanes Protogenos is very similar to Prometheus or Lucifer. So it's this
Mhm.
idea in Gnosticism of the fall of man into matter. And this is what we see with the river Styx idea and this notion, right? You're on the vessel of your ego being carried through the river Styx, this sort of unawakened, dreaming, slumbering god or entity that is unaware of itself, right? It's in a state of amnesia, forgetfulness of the self, abulia, which is a loss of will, and of course that of I forget the third one now. It'll come back to me. But these three major losses are what firstly are found within the cosmic creation myth of Gnosticism and the idea of cosmic abandonment, and also within that of power itself. That's how power maintains control over oneself, right? Amnesia, abulia, and God, it'll come back to me. But it's basically the loss of one's self, apathy, which is the loss of the
Loss
care.
of will. Loss of will.
Well, abulia is loss of will, but
Mm,
apathy is the loss of the care of one's own survival. So this is what you see with the you know, they dole out the drugs right through the CIA, through Mossad, through MI6, what have you. Um, it spaces people out. Of course, as well, we have, like what you were mentioning, the drug of the digital screen, the black scrying mirror, that also spaces people out. And people forget about their own survival. I'll give you a prime example. My fiance's friends, all of our female friends, and she has a few gay friends as well, all of them, I'm not joking you, every one of them, they will pay for what they call luxury items like makeup and you know things that will enhance your aesthetics, enhance self-actual or what they believe to be self-actualization. Of course, it's false.
mhm.
They will do that. They will buy they things as soon as they get their wage slip or their wage packet, their income every month. They'll buy those things first before they go and get food or what have you. So, you know, one of my fiance's friends, she basically spent about, you know, I think it was like 10 or 20% of her income on the makeup and these things. And she's like, well, what's the point of working if you can't treat yourself? And then at the end, when she's doing her shopping at the end of, you know, the week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, then she'll just buy really cheap processed microwave meals, pot noodles, that sort of micro noodles here. All of these just crap. But as long as she has the makeup, as long
Right.
as she has,
Right,
so
because
so
the
the
concept replaced the organic. There
bingo,
you go. Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
this is it. The society of froth rather than the taste of the beer. So
Mhm.
so absolutely, this is what it is. So this is the fall of man. Man becomes a shadow, an embryonic shadow from life itself, as it's stated in here. Life itself is born from the embryonic shadow that is pressurized by the nigredo, the putrefaction of the previous cycle. And of course, if it smashes, if it cracks, if the shell cracks and the embryo dies, then of course um, it's not worthy to carry on time and what have you going forward. This is the idea
Mhm.
found within the Orphic egg symbolism, also known as the world egg. You'll notice too that the so there's a distinction in biology between I forget the terms now, but those offspring which are birthed with or grow embryonically within their parent, within the mother, and those that grow outside. And this is interesting because what you're seeing here is it's almost like um, power. It's what this is indicating with the Orphic egg and such, and what you're seeing here is that power itself is infertile. That it almost steals, as you can see of the snake, coiling and wrapping and imprisoning the embryo and the egg. It almost steals the offspring or the eggs of other beings, and then it shapes the egg while it shapes the embryo rather while it's in that vessel. So what it's really stating is that power itself is infertile. Power will destroy itself. Power is a genetic dead end. It's a biological dead end. Thus, it must engage in almost like the cuckoo bird, brood parasitism. It has to steal your children, right, for war. It has to steal your children to maintain its economic Ponzi scheme. It has to steal your children to even perpetuate the system itself. And this is what you're seeing here. Um,
Mm.
so power doesn't birth the replicants of itself within its own self. It births it within a sort of echo chamber, if you will. Again, as you see of the Orphic egg. You'll notice too, is if we move on further.
Mhm.
Oh, by the way, you'll notice, harkening back to the we saw that the letters in the beginning. Where is it? Where is it? Here. You'll notice it starts with E and goes to Z. Those are, of course, 22 layers. We've already went over that, but you'll notice A, B, C, D are missing, right?
Mhm.
Which is interesting because A, B, C, D, of course, the first four letters. You'll notice that you'll notice the four coils wrapped there. So it's almost relating again to this idea that we don't necessarily see the foundations of this system, the sort of foundational three-dimensional representational virtual reality which surrounds us. We start with
Yeah.
E and we go to Z because it's easy, right? It's the path of least resistance. So you have these ideas too. But you'll notice ab chao, out of chaos. He is birthed out of chaos. The embryo is birthed out of chaos. Um this sort of brood parasite that is power that you see within the screen itself, that is birthed from chaos. All of it is
Yes,
birthed from chaos.
and I think that what is gestating there, being again my interpretation of it, what is gestating there is AI. So it is the gestation of AI that came to order the chaos of organic mankind. And if we understand that what is perceived as chaos is anything that is unpredictable, anything that is unexpected, we understand then that what the mission of this, let's say, quote unquote, fabricated God is to promote an orderly society. So a society that is so structured that nothing unpredictable is allowed. And everything that would be unpredictable becomes predicted within the equation of its decision making, right? So I think that what is gestating there is eventually the AI that is that quote unquote Christ God figure that we see on the animation as well. And again, I am not saying that this is a fact. I am saying that this is my intuitive interpretation of what the movie tries to convey.
Yeah, it's well, of course, as well. I mean, think about it. AI itself is simply what we've been discussing. It's the next stage of this thing. By the way, that was another thing that these people would talk about: predictive analytics in university. We can use predictive analytics to, and I'm thinking,
And you
Jesus,
see,
oh,
look there, you've just paused at the right spot because it's in the eye, in the third eye of
hmm
this Christ figure, is the TV demon. So he is absorbing. This transition is not by accident. It was not by accident that the fade in of the next scene emerged through the third eye. So he is dreaming the TV demon, you see? So he is absorbing everything that is on TV to compose his database of knowledge, quote unquote knowledge, right? So this is what really leads me to, all these things really leads me to think that this animated Christ figure presented here is a representation of the quote unquote AI God.
you'll notice as well, it's all from the word, but it's
Mhm.
almost like a word that's spoken, of course, with the forked tongue, with a purple tongue as well. So it's the Tyrrhenian purple. To be born in purple
Mhm.
was to be of royalty, at least within the Eastern Roman or Byzantine world system. You'll also notice as well is that I've always found this interesting. His teeth, of course, are all crooked, jagged, a bit like the cliffs in which that of the fool fell from. But it's a devouring thing. He devours. But you'll notice that again, it glistens like gold,
Mm.
but it looks actually rotten, right? On further inspection. So it's this idea, of course, that not all that glitters is gold. You'll notice too that the molars at the back, it's only really the front teeth that are canine or fanged. Perhaps you could say this was artificially done. He artificially filed his teeth down, a bit like he artificially filed his mind, like he's trying to artificially file down the minds of his victim, that young boy, that Ludovic. But you'll notice, I've always thought of this with the molars at the back. They, how can I put this? He's almost hiding his enfeeblement. The all power is a paper
Yes.
tiger. It's
Yes.
only at the front that which you see, which has any sort of bearing, right?
Yeah.
That which projects force. Beyond that, if you look at behind the curtain, if you will, behind, of course, of the front teeth here, you see that actually it's all smooth. It's rotten. It lacks any credibility in and of itself. You'll notice too that he has the one ring. Again, this is all on the left eye. Pardon me, the left side. Um, he has also as well his right eye is blinded. Again, meaning that he's of the left side. He's purely of judgment. He's purely of the material world. But the
Mhm.
ring itself is the indication of the of uh, of the system itself, right? The one ring to rule them all, right? Was it one ring to rule them all, one ring to find them, one ring to um
Bring
one
them
ring
all and in the
bring them all,
darkness find them.
and
Yes.
in the darkness bind them. That's it. So
Mhm.
this is what I think you're seeing here. You'll notice too, like similarly to the pointed ears of Obama. We'll actually see it at a greater extent here. Yeah, the pointed ears here. I think that's an allusion to Pan. And the reason I bring up that, we probably don't have time to flesh this out, but Pan is effectively the all, right? He's sort of the fearful image that's found within the heart of darkness. In fact, you could say that this element, this representational concept within the heart of darkness, this of the fear, the silence, the even like what we brought up with the nihilistic penguin in that last discussion, it's that idea that fundamentally man is the only meaning in and of himself, right? The canvas has no meaning except what the color of the paint perceives within it, or paints within it. So it's that idea that man is seeking meaning within something that perhaps has none, right? A world that has none, an objective reality that has none. But the reason this ties in with Pan and power is because Pan itself is almost us projecting a meaning onto nature. Again, the representation eventually becomes the reality. So Pan itself becomes the basis of civilization because there's not one document or one page of history of civilization that cannot be synonymized with barbarity or barbarism. So again, this very state of nature-esque living. Again, it's
But
just
that is
all a facade, a representation. Jump in,
yes,
man.
but that is imposed. That story, that history is imposed. We cannot, in good conscience, take that history as fact. And the thing is, if we treat that history as our actual past, it legitimizes everything that we're talking about here. That we need order. We do need, if it wasn't for, regulations and this and that and governments and police and we would just, be barbaric and kill each other, because that is legitimized by that past. And that is one of the things that we also need to let go from our memory room, is the perception that our past is as told. If there even was a continuous progression of pasts, if it wasn't just starts and ends, cycles, right? But I like to, as you know, I like to move away from that idea of history, exactly because I see that what it intends to do is to legitimize misanthropy, to give us the idea, yes, man is awful and we need these systems in order to be less awful. You understand? But sorry, that was just a parenthesis I needed to bring up there.
No, absolutely. But I mean, perhaps this is sort of projected from our belief in history or what have you. But um, civilizations, at least in our contemporary world, they are masks of barbarism. I mean, fundamentally, when you look at
Sure,
the power
sure,
system and the
sure,
architecture behind it,
sure.
it is very barbaric. And the reason I link that to Pan is because again, what words do we see Pan in? Panic, right? that's
Mm.
the entire reason for the perma crisis. You see pantomime. Pantomime. What is that? Well, it literally means from the Greek to mimic the all. So very interesting. Again, you could say that's similar to AI, right? The Internet of all things. Yuval Noah Harari mentions that it could be the new god, right? The new god, the new lord of all
Yeah,
things,
well,
and all of
Pan
these
is also
ideas.
Pan is also in pansy, but
Yeah.
but I would, joke aside. Yes, all civilizations that you see now have promote one form or another of masked barbarism, but it is because all of the civilizations are based upon a legitimized past, in the sense that this country existed for this amount of time and it had these kings or these presidents or these prominent figures and whatever, and it gives you a context to legitimize what is now, and it often gives you even a context to say that if it wasn't for what we have now, look at how bad it could be, right? In this century, this happened because there was no king, for example, right? It was civil war on the streets and brother killing brother, and these are stories. This is because listen, even if we are to assume that this was 100% true, these stories, okay? Why does the past need to be the now? Why do you? Because it's like, you got hurt emotionally by a woman in your past. So that means that you will no longer relate or ever get a connection to another woman because it might go as bad as the last one did, right? It may even be 100% fact, but it doesn't mean that it should rule and legitimize a artificial living just for the sake of not getting hurt. Because the fact is, yeah, you don't get hurt, but you get spiritually killed. So which is worse? The risk of things going bad in that sense of things getting uncomfortable in one way or another, or just living a not a stand, a mask of a life, right? So this is why, because even if we were to treat history as 100% fact, which I find very difficult to for me to digest, and call me crazy, um, it doesn't need to rule the present. It doesn't need to legitimize the present at all. Past is experience that we learn from, and if it's true, let's learn from that, sure. But that doesn't mean that you regulate it, that you regulate in relation to a protection from the past. Past is a ghost. It's already gone. People are holding on to pasts, several pasts, real and imaginary, right? Their own, the past that they themselves lived, they hold on to that. And then they hold on to imaginary pasts, collective, that who, like centuries ago, who the hell knows what happened, if anything, right? And so that is what all masks of barbarism, like you were talking about, and I agree with that. Um, um, stand on. They stand on stories. So you remove the stories and you remove the legitimacy. And then what happens? Who is the one that is afraid? The system is afraid, right? But the thing that you will quickly find out is that the system is made up of people like you and me. It's made up of your neighbor, because you will see your neighbor cowering in fear, asking for government. Please, please come save me, please. From an imaginary ghost. He would be like that kid over there, being tormented by the TV, right? If something, if the system would lose legitimacy, it would be people like you and me that you would see afraid. And that shows that they are the system. And the elites are merely paid servants of that. Very well paid, granted, but they are paid servants performing a service for these people.
I also think as well with the idea of Pan, which is that you see, for example, there's several. I think it was the Gotland or Gotthard tunnel, the opening ceremony of that several years back now. Funnily enough, actually contained an image not of Pan per se, because that's the Hellenistic equivalent, but it contained an image of, or not an image, a sort of rendition of Cernunnos, which was again the Celtic version. You also had Cairn or Cairne, uh, again meaning horn. Cernunnos means the one horn, and that was sort of known to the Italic tribes and the Etruscans as well. So you see this constant connect. Of course, you have CERN as well, right? It's basically it's based off that. But interestingly, CERN, of course, is circular. The facility in your Geneva circular, I forget what the facility is called now, both the Hadron Collider and, of course, the particle decelerator. But interestingly, this links to Pan as well, and it links to Carnunos, it links to Kearney, because interestingly, you had a connection between, well, in the Celtic world, the torque, which is this sort of similar to this sort of semicircular earring that he wears there, or of course it was just fully he had the circle, or sometimes the Shen ring, which was a sort of Egyptian Hellenic crossover. But again, it's the same idea. It's infinitude. It is it's power. It is nobility as well. He was also associated with, interestingly, the serpent, often a ram-headed serpent. He was also known as the Lord of the Wild Things. This may relate as well to Pashupati, who was the Lord of all animals, quite literally. He is depicted with horns, seated in a yogic meditation posture similar to Carnunos, surrounded by beasts. He is a sort of proto-Shiva figure representing the raw and tamed life force that is perfectly mastered from within. Again, so you can see why it's quite a potent symbol to the elite, to the powerful. They, again, as most hierarchical structures are based on, all hierarchical structures, eventually once that structure lingers for a bit, for several generations, the elite start to think of themselves not as human beings like the rest of us, but as perhaps something greater, perhaps of a higher or elitist or even godlike or demigod type of status. And also as well, you find with Pan and a lot of these other deities, including Saturn as well, that they are linked with that sort of earthly below, that mundus subterraneus, that the mystery of the interior of the earth. And what that relates to fundamentally is that power itself is based on not just this sort of perpetual continuation, but it's based on the sine wave. So it's based on periods of crisis, then respite, or on larger spans of time. It's based on this sort of self-regulating machine that self-regulates and self-perpetuates based upon intentional artificial collapse. So it's tying in with these concepts too. Yeah, it's the generative pulse of the physical world. So that's what they're tapping into. Also, we've brought up panic, mass formation psychosis, the event of 2020. Again, these things are all related. They're all based on formulas. Yeah, so it's the idea as well that you find between the forest and between the city. And you'll notice, I don't know if you get this in your country, but there's this in Scotland, I believe it happens in England, Wales, and Ireland too. There's this constant reoccurring headline, either in the local newspapers, the regional, or the national newspapers, where they're saying there was a big cat spotted in the forest, right? Right, big cat, don't go here, big cat, leopard, black jaguar, we don't know how the hell it got here, it must have came on a raft from South America. We've got a
I heard Zeal talk about that once, yes, in a
we've got
recording.
an illegal immigrant, black jaguar, running about the forest, so it's this idea, right? There's other formulas, but I just bring that one up because they constantly use it, and it becomes laughable after a while. But the reason for that is because they want you to fear nature. It's this idea. So it's Pan is this notion. Again, you're projecting a representational order vis-a-vis the concept of Pan onto the heart of darkness, where effectively that's the conceptual unknown. It's similar to death or what have you, right? To mankind, it's the darkness. Yeah. Therefore, civilization, the ruling system of civilization presents a safe and orderly refuge, even though, of course,
Yes.
in
In
contrast.
contrast with nature. Absolutely agreed. Yes.
Yeah,
Go on. Sorry.
absolutely. Yeah. So it's, and but all of the architecture of the city, for example, the walls, these things are almost there's a utility to them, right? Okay, of course,
Mhm.
walls defend you from outside attackers, but there's also a psychological parameter to it, which is think of the walls. The walls themselves are similar to what occurs within the sort of psychological system that civilization produces, right? Of course, it's safe and orderly, it offers security, but at what cost? Well, fundamentally, it creates a compartmentalized physical or mental wall within your own sort
Yes.
of cognitive
Yes.
city.
If the wall is taken as an absolute, yes. Yes. Exactly. Because if you continue to perceive the wall as a function and not as an absolute, it won't cause that. There is a function to walls. It's good to have walls to protect you, from the weather and whatever it is, from the environment that sometimes gets rough or that kind of thing. It has a functional value, but that doesn't mean that it becomes an absolute. If it becomes an absolute instead of what it was supposed to be functionally, then yes, that you are talking about emerges in the psyche, and it's no short of insanity. Yes.
And so this relates to the Ordo ab Chao
Hmm.
concept. If we understand that Pan is this barbarism of the wild that
That is
is
out
sort of
there. Yes.
reined
Hmm.
in, well,
Yeah.
also as well, it's reined in and controlled through
Mhm.
representational images of this barbarism through the Ordo ab Chao, the Solvay coagula, basically mass formation psychosis and permacrisis, which
And and
maintains society.
and just sorry, I know that I'm interrupting you a lot, but
No, it's
I
okay.
need to.
Jump in. Just jump in, man.
And also, if nothing or actually shows any threat from that natural site outside of the wall of society, the society creates a representation of that danger
The black jaguar.
to keep exactly the black jaguar or the terrorists that may attack at any moment, or
No, here's another one that comes to mind. See, in the 50s and 60s, see, to
mhm,
stop people foraging, there was a lot of I don't know how it was in England, but in Scotland, I remember my grandmother speaking about this. In her area, there was a hell of a lot of stories. Even monuments went up to these children that supposedly died from eating berries and things like that. From
mhm,
but it was like rife, absolutely rife, and then that set into the mind to the sort of zeitgeist, at least of Scotland. Do not eat anything outside. Don't touch it. Don't eat it.
yes,
I mean, it's to the point now where I love when see the blackberry or bramble. We call them brambles here. The bramble season comes. I also pick wild garlic in that as well. But um, I mean, I will literally just eat the. Of course, as long as it's high up, I'll just eat the bramble right from the bush. Right. I don't wash it. People can say that's dirty. I'm completely healthy. I've never got any sort of disease from that at all. So um,
you better test for COVID.
I better test for COVID. But what's weird, when I was with my fiance and that, I thought it was just normal, right? Of
Mm,
course, people wash them and things like that. But if you're on a hike, you pick a couple of brambles off the bush and you eat them just for a quick, sugar rush or what have you,
mhm.
and some energy. And I was with my fiance. Well, this is the first. I just met her at the time, and we're with all our friends, and they're like totally cosmopolitan. They live in the big city. I live outside of it, and so we're on the walk up the hill, and I'm like, oh, here a couple of brambles, great. So I just start eating them and pick them, just walking up, eating them, and they're looking at me. They're saying, "Oh my god, oh no, put them down, put them down. You don't know what's been on that." I said, "Well, you don't know it's been on the crap that you eat from the supermarket, chicken washed in chlorine or what have you, but you still eat that. Yeah, that's safe though. That's safe."
Yes.
Oh, right. Okay, I see. Interesting. So this is the thing, right? It's these little, it's little subtle,
Yes.
perceptual alterations within the sort of field of possibility, the field of ideas, which makes these things possible, which basically turns what really human beings are an apex predator. That turns the human being from an apex predator into basically a dependent prey species quite easily,
Mhm.
just through perception, you know. Um,
Yeah.
there's another
Yeah,
thing I
agreed.
was going to mention. Oh, yeah, Pashupati relating to Shiva. You also have outside of the CERN facility the Shiva Nataraja, which is the Lord of the Cosmic Dance. We're going to see this later on in the video. So basically, that
In
dance is the
in 4 or 5 episodes from here,
in
right?
4 or 5 episodes. So Shiva is dancing to destroy the old tired universe and to create the new one. So it's all of these ideas surrounding that. Oh yeah, Baphomet as well, Solway et Coagula. The Caduceus as well. By the way, Solway et Coagula is a hermetic axiom, interestingly. So it's not
Mhm.
just tied to the Baphomet. He also has the goat head. So we're relating back to the goats and such. Right, continuing on. Put it at full speed or we'll be here for forever. Right. Just something to mention really, really quickly on that, and then we'll skip ahead. Um, Another thing with pan is I don't know what's the Portuguese word for bread.
Boom.
Pão, right?
Yes.
And in Latin it's panis.
Yes. It
Interestingly,
comes from
and
that. Yes. Mhm.
yeah, so that's another connection, right? We even saw with the breaking apart of the apple. It's the frangipani, which is
Mhm.
the breaking of the bread. That's something. That's another connection we can make there. But the breaking of the bread itself is almost. Again. It's almost similar to the Solway coagula, right? You're breaking it in half so you get beyond the crust. So you can almost like what the serpent's doing here. You can eat from the yolk of the egg, right? You break it apart to eat from the yolk of the egg. The yolk itself is the solar. It's the sun. It's the soul. So ultimately, what you're seeing here is that soul is completely gone. You'll notice as well. There's that dot there, again representing like what we see at the beginning with Lily, surrounding her. This circle. So you have the exoteric sun, and that's the representational
Where
world, and then you have the esoteric,
where
that of
where
the hidden.
where is that dot you're meant? Can you point?
That dot at the navel.
Ah, okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah.
So the navel itself is funnily enough, when civilizations collapse, they tend to go into navel gazing, which is
Mm.
interesting. But again, it's the navel is where you're sort of tethered. Well, in the case of this individual, he was tethered to the egg. He was tethered to the hollow husk of the system. Of course, in our own experience, we were tethered to our mother within the womb, within the darkness, and then we were birthed into light.
Mhm.
So the idea that you're seeing with that is that the navel itself is the source of life. It's the source of the real. However, when systems tend to go into cognitive exhaustion at the end of their lifespan, they engage in navel gazing. What does that mean? Well, what they're doing is they're looking not at the navel as it is, and the sort of deeper
Mm.
idea of the navel, which is the source of life. They're looking at it as a mere representation, a sort of shriveled, desiccated husk of their erstwhile
Yes,
birth.
they're looking at
Similar idea.
the inside of the walls that we were talking about just now, as if the walls were an absolute, instead of looking at the walls for the function that they are, and also outside of the walls. Yes.
Exactly. And there's also a connection between the yolk and the yolk. So
Mm.
the yolk of the sun, the yolk of the sun, is it's that is the thing that provides life. But the yoke of power, for example, is that which is sort of encapsulates you like an egg. It's what controls you. So you're seeing a little play on words there. I can imagine that was probably intentional. I've got written here as well. The yolk is the golden center of the egg, the nucleus of life. Visually, it acts as an anointment of solar golden fluid. In alchemy, the transmutation of base matter into gold. Soul represents the attainment of pure enlightened consciousness. So he's literally dripping with the awakened solar mind, but he doesn't necessarily know it yet. There's also the idea as well that you see, which is that the serpent is eaten from that golden yoke. And so the breaking of the yoke phonetically and symbolically, a yoke is a wooden beam used to harness beasts of burden, tying back, of course, to the, as I've got in my notes, the car of the donkey. By hatching, he casts off the heavy yoke of the demiurgic matrix, no longer a beast of burden for the elite. But another thing to mention here is this relates to Aqua Regia. And Aqua Regia was it's literally the royal waters. And what that was used within the alchemical transmutational great work, specifically Basil Valentinus's 12-stage process to that great work, is that took out the unseen, what would you call it, contaminants within the gold. That was the final stage before, that was the rubeda. In fact, when you put gold into aqua regia, I forget what the modern term of it is, it's a sort of solvent or acid. It leaves behind, it reacts with the gold, it leaves behind a red residue, hence the rubeda, the reddening, or the red dawn. However, previous to that, you would have you had another solvent, which was symbolized as a green lion. I'll have to get the name for it here. So the green lion, as we see in the Rosarium Philosophorum, or the Rosary of the Philosophers, 16th century alchemical work, it depicts a green lion devouring the sun. So the green lion, oh yeah, it is. It's aqua regia, or vitriol, also known as vitriol. Vitriol as well is also an alchemical acronym, which means Visita Interiora Terra Terre Rectificando Invenis Occultum Lapidem, which means visit the interior of the earth and rectify, or tikkun, and by rectification or tikkun, you will find the hidden stone, or the black stone, right? It's the idea of power. It's the idea you see with Athanasius Kircher, that the world itself is in the center of the world. There's this great molten mass that is constantly swirling, and it's engaged in putrefaction. It devours itself like time. And you have from that, in his Pyrophilociorum, you have from that these vents that go up, a bit like veins. And then you have the volcanoes on the crust, which vent out this pressure so that the system just constantly maintains itself on its own devourment. So it's almost like a self-parasitism. By the way, that illustration by Athanasius Kircher looks exactly like the corona structure of the COVID. I think we've elapsed long enough in terms of the 2020 event to say that word. So it looks exactly like it. Exactly. Very interesting. Athanasius Kircher, by the way, was also
which more reinforces that it is that it was and continues to be a narrative that was written in. That's why these symbols match. And so I would say that the historical work was a scenes of the next episode for whatever cycle it was in. And then it was included also on this one as a sort of premonitory, prophetic kind of thing. It wasn't a prophetic kind of thing. It is, these things are well established, and the scripts and the narratives follow specific models exactly because they have worked countless times, even though there is a loss of fuel every time. But it's in the opinion of the scriptwriters and those who prefer the system, which, like I said, it will be your neighbors and people of your family and so on and so forth. It is preferable to lose fuel than to lose the actual play. So
Exactly, exactly, and this is what you're seeing too, which is that the real fuel um, is fundamentally the wastage of the soul,
mhm,
which is another thing you're seeing here as well.
yeah.
Um, so the green itself is that intimates that this thing is of unripeness, right? It's not of the spiritual, the golden spiritual. It's of lower realms, right? The physical, the biological, the matrix of survival, fear or panic, and lesser basal instincts. It's also untamed. It's raw. It's unrefined. It's the forces of nature in the lower physical world. It's of the sort of green man, the Bacchic or Dionysian or Sabaothian or Baphometic, or as we said, similar to Pan and Cernunnos, those ideas. Another thing to mention as well is that, yeah, so the vitriol or the aqua regia, the green lion which devours the sun, in alchemy, that's seen, interest again, because it's the playbook of power, that's seen as a necessary evil, similar to Set.
Mm.
Set spears a pep, which is the deeper chaos, as Ra, as he of course pulls um, the barge of Ra, or the bark of Ra, through the underworld. So
Mhm.
again, it's the same idea that you see perennially, cross culturally, because
The
ultimately it's power project and how it controls systems.
You said the boat of Ra, but it should be the boat of Anubis, right?
Oh no, sorry, I'm speaking of the Egyptian mythology.
Ah,
So
okay,
so
okay, okay, okay.
yeah, in here it's Anubis,
Yeah,
which is a
mhm,
distinction to make.
yeah,
I'm speaking of the actual Egyptian mythology where you see
right,
Set at
right.
the head
Mhm,
of that bark, and then of course he spears a pep, which is the far more deeper chaos, the far more primordial chaos, and then Ra then of course is resurrected once again. Again, the red dawn, the Rubeda.
mhm,
So
mhm,
after the darkness comes the dawn. That these ideas, but fundamentally, it's linking back to what Athanasius Kircher was mentioning, what of course the alchemists were mentioning, what the Rosicrucians even stated, right? The devouring of the sun with the golden blood, as you see dripping down,
mhm,
pouring from the sun's face, or his head in this case. That itself is it's the green line which represents the raw and highly corrosive natural forces, that acidic or vitriolic force which must dissolve the gold to then purify it cyclically to maintain the system. So it's the self-regulating machine of power which maintains itself through permacrisis. That's basically what it's stating.
yeah.
Um, yeah, so we'll
Perceived permacrisis. Well, let's move
perceived, yeah.
a little bit further, but we're around the 2 hours, so uh,
I don't know if you have anything to mention regarding that.
yeah, pull
On
it
that.
a bit back. Ah, those were like triangle planes.
Yeah, sort of Masonic. So you have the Masonic thing, which is the
Yeah,
47. I'll get into that in the other video, but also B2 Spirit Bombers, they're known as.
yeah,
Interestingly, B2 or 22, right?
yeah. The square
Um,
and compass. Yeah.
yeah, so it appears it's blowing up a mosque of some kind.
Mhm.
Some have even said it's Bushehr power plant. And that, of course, Iran is attacked, then what you're seeing, was it
Right.
five? These five missiles that they they sort of spin off. It's the counterattack of Iran onto Tel Aviv. This is how some are interpreting that. I don't know, how do you interpret that, man?
No, I think yes, because we're in the geopolitical narrative, And that's why I keep saying that this animation is aimed at presenting scenes of the next episodes. So yes, I think that interpretation is quite plausible. And of course, it would have been, now it makes sense to us in 2012. People didn't know when or if the US would ever attack Iran, or if, all these things that we see now. But it was, I think, a sort of um, uh, like those previews of what is to come. I think it is presenting the narrative that will eventually lead to the presentation of the new Jesus. And I already told you, I'm not going to reiterate again who I think that Jesus is, in that, not who, but what that Jesus will be presented as. But in any case, I think that this is the story of the presentation of that Jesus that was created in that Orphic egg, like you were saying, that was entirely programmed by the screen, by the TV, by the stories within the screen, and that will be one day king of the world. But yes,
The new God,
that seems
absolutely.
plausible. Yes, that seems absolutely plausible, that this is the attack on Iran, and Iran might counterattack, and etc. Yes, seems plausible.
There's another connection to make as well, is that you see the bridges at the back, they have a very
Yeah.
distinctive shape. And we
Mhm.
saw that he was talking about Bridge Day. Now, this was, I forget the bridge's name here, but this was the bridge that was attacked recently.
Huh.
And it looks, I don't know, it looks uncannily similar.
Yeah. Yes.
If anyone can point out what bridge that is that was attacked, it's a major one in Tehran. And yeah, it looks uncannily similar
Indeed.
to
Indeed.
that. If I can add that back, yeah. So there's also something else to mention down at the bottom right, but for the life of me, I forget what that place is now. It'll come back to me. I actually think that might be somewhere in Mecca. Again, I don't quote me on that. It
Wasn't
shows up. It shows up on another scene later on, but
isn't that the concentric circles, like quote unquote Atlantis kind of structure? Or am I seeing it wrong?
it is very similar to that as well, and it also is Atlantis is also similar to the Simsum of
Mm.
the
Mhm.
the divine contraction. It looks very similar, and interestingly too, Epstein had a similar sort of paving complex, a sort of design within the paving stones set out
Mm.
on Zorro Ranch like that. So, I mean, these people are playing around with these ideas, but these ideas aren't necessarily real. They're abstractions which
Yes.
they've then taken as almost potent representations of their own control, of their own formula of power, and they've projected it onto the world. And of course, people assume it to be true. Another connection, by the way, is I don't know. Can you see my cursor here?
Yes. Yes, I can. Mhm.
Do you notice that looks like Donald Duck? Does it? So that's another connection with Donald Trump,
Or
perhaps.
Pluto. No, Pluto. It looks like Pluto.
Oh,
There's
maybe
the
Pluto
nose.
as well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the nose. The nose. Yeah.
yeah. It's a chimera of Pluto and, and Donald Duck. But yeah, Pluto is
I mean,
interesting too,
yeah.
right? Death
When
and
we
such.
look at clouds, we can see whatever. But yes, yes. Go on. Sorry.
So yeah, there's a connection there too, right? There's also stars up here. There's somewhere in my notes that I've actually tried to decipher what constellation they're pointing to. Perhaps to pick out a date of what they're relating to here. But uh, that's I can't find that in these sets of notes. It must be in another book that I was writing, because these things are all dotted about. But yeah, a lot of these things, like at the back here, this and you actually see that with the female as well somewhere. Where is it? Maybe it's later on. Sorry, but these are almost like ships being sunk and things such as that,
Hmm.
um, which is interesting to say the least, right? you'll notice too that see the crescent of Islam, which the crescent and the star of Islam, funnily enough, that wasn't a symbol, a traditional symbol of Islam.
Yes.
I don't recall, if I recall correctly. That came about maybe 100 years or so back, when you had the sort of nationalist revolutions throughout the Islamic world. Of course, you had it throughout the rest of the world where the modern nation states were being set up. But the crescent is similar to the blood moon tetrad. No, it's not. It's actually flipped around. So what you're seeing is you can correct me here if I'm wrong. This is the waning gibbous, and this is just directly behind a new moon. Yeah.
That one is the waning. Yes, waning. Yes.
Yes,
Mhm.
and that would be the waxing gibbous.
A waxing.
Yes.
Mhm.
So that's the idea that we've just pardon me, we're at the end of a cycle. The Islamic waning gibbous implies that perhaps Islam is the beginning of the new cycle, right? Or the attack on Islam through, of course, Iran. The 5 as well relates to, of course, the pentacle and of man. Even the idea of the fallen star, the 5 elements. It's to do with man. It's also to do with Venus, the morning and evening star, because of course Venus, through its cycle of conjunctions, it through I believe it's an 8-year cycle. It will actually, if you jot out where it conjuncts relative to the sun, is it relative to the sun or the earth? Whatever one, it actually draws out a pentacle, draws out a 5-rayed star, which is interesting to say the least, right? It's this idea of time. Venus is related to time, in some sense. Perhaps it's related to Sophia. Sophia itself, if you break that down etymologically, has connections to even what we would know as the seraph, right, or the seraphim, the fiery serpents as well. So the serpent appears to be related to time too. It appears to be some sort of if it's not the main head or representational prime of time, it's an ancillary to it in some respect, probably relating to the sine wave or something along these lines.
Yeah. So we've advanced 5 seconds or 10. No, not even 10.
We're at 3 minutes and 10 seconds. Yeah, we're near as damn it halfway. Unfortunately, we're going to get to this one next, which may take us a little bit of time to sort of work through. But
Yeah.
apart from that, it's all, you know.
I mean, we're having fun too. Hopefully the viewers are also getting their kick, and something useful, of course, out of this. And I mean, there's no pressure to do a set number of episodes, but I think it will be 33.
Yeah. Oh God, Jesus! If it gets to 33, we couldn't even stop at 34 because that itself is also a number of occult significance, at least symbolically.
No, if we start getting close to the number, we have to drag it along a little bit to make it to 33.
Right. Okay.
It has to.
Right. Yeah. Well, we will do that. Like Dante Alighieri, the 33 steps out of hell. The 33 episodes out of the chaos. We might actually, this might navigate, this series might navigate the entire chaotic episode that we're in the series leading up to the birth of the Antichrist.
Oh,
so,
yeah. Oh, yes, it might follow real time.
Yeah, so it's there you go, guys. So Armunn, I thank you for joining me again, and until the next one, man.
Thank you very much. These are very enjoyable, and I mean, the next one is right around the corner. I'm sure we'll set something up either later this week or in the beginning of the next week or whatever. But it's really great, and it's always a pleasure to do these recordings with you, as was a pleasure to, and by the way, let me advertise, to do that live with Chris Miner and you and Ronan that showed up later on. So it's always, a pleasure for me to do these, and looking forward to the next one as well.
Absolute pleasure as well, man. Likewise. Right, guys, thank you very much for joining us. And until the next one, bye bye.
Thank you. See ya.